Good afternoon and welcome to Jeff and the Rabbi. Well, this week is Holocaust Remembrance Week. And I think it's great that we're going to do our show on the Holocaust today. And you mentioned to me in the warm-up here when you sent me all the information I need that a lot of people don't celebrate Holocaust Remembrance Day or Week. This is where I think I got you beat. When I was a kid growing up, in Virginia, Little Heidelberg in Virginia, this is one of our biggest holidays.
They did it.
We celebrated it huge. We had bands, we had parties, we had the drinking, we had the little beer steins like this. All the guys dressed up.
All the locals really remembered the Holocaust.
They loved it.
Fondly.
They dressed up with those short pants with the high socks and a little green hat, and then we all goose-stepped downtown, and it was a great holiday.
Right.
In fact, where I grew up, I think next to Easter, this was the biggest one. They said as long as there's one dead Jew, so Easter, Holocaust Day, either one. So it was a big celebration there. So I don't know what you're talking about.
Right.
We did it well.
From.
Right.
Isn't that funny that over there they were celebrating it, and then you get some amongst the Jews,
You guys just aren't as observant as we are, I guess.
Right.
Where I grew up. So
that's the story. Actually, it's kind of sad because it's really, I don't know if it's still being observed, but it seems to me, in the time that I've been in Atlanta, less and less and less. I remember when I first got here, more than 25 years ago, they used to get a pretty big crowd.
Right.
Now it's less so, and it's less so.
I gotta be honest, I didn't realize until you sent me an email that this was Holocaust Remembrance Week.
Right.
I feel bad.
Last year, I was actually at the JCC, and I was sitting in the audience while they were having the ceremony.
Right.
And I was looking out over the ball fields, and I saw the kids are playing ball. So nice. In a certain way, it's like a testimony to the fact that we've survived because all the kids are playing ball and all that. And then all of a sudden, a thought struck me. All these people are having a ceremony here commemorating the Holocaust, and all these kids are playing ball. And they didn't even sound a horn or tell the kids maybe to observe a moment of silence during the ball game.
Right.
I mean, at baseball stadiums all around the country, they stop for Jackie Robinson's Memorial Day, and here they didn't even tell their own kids to stop playing ball for a minute and remember the Holocaust.
Wow. Well,
to me, it's kind of sad. The Holocaust isn't really being observed or remembered too much, and of course, we're living in that era where the survivors are few and far in between.
they really are. It seems like maybe more in the world we're remembering Holocaust non-observance. I mean, everybody's kind of, as you said, the survivors are now passing away, and the rest of the world is kind of saying, did it really happen? I mean, we've always said never again, never again, never again, but the rest of the world is, if you just look at Europe and now look at our country, is kind of making like it never happened.
Then there's another question, and this has been a question that's been persistent, and this is what always intrigues me when I like to talk about in Holocaust Memorial Day. What happened?
Right.
What happened? The Holocaust happened. 6 million Jews were killed by the Nazis. Therefore, what's your takeaway? What's your takeaway from that?
Well, I was talking to my buddy Mel Gibson earlier before the show, and he's saying 6 million, 3,000 is what's the difference? So a couple Jews got in the way. A lot of people died in the war. What's the difference?
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know. I mean, 6 million Jews died. I mean, there's a lot of different takeaways to it. I mean, there's a lot of different theories. I mean, why did it happen? We talk why did God let it happen? Why did it happen? What does it mean today?
Right. And this is the same thing in everything. Something bad happens. You want to deal with it.
Right.
You have to first understand what happened. This is Sandy Hook. All those children got killed. Children, teachers, children, and adults got killed.
Right.
Okay, bad. No doubt. We want to deal with it. No doubt. What happened so that we can deal with it? So some people said, some guns get out of control. Some people say it's a mental health issue. Some people say it's as we talked about here, there's the degeneration of a society. I mean, but unless you first identify what happened, what good is dealing with it? How do you know you're even going to be dealing with the it if you got the wrong it?
You got the wrong it. That makes sense. So what? So in the Holocaust, what was it? Why did it happen?
So it's a really big one. 6 million people.
It's not a minor thing.
Not a minor thing. And it's so interesting that 6 million people died, and yet there isn't really consensus as to what it was. Like, what happened?
Right.
Or what happened? What's the takeaway? So, amongst Jews themselves, this has been a huge debate from the moment the war stopped. You know, the minute the fighting stopped, everyone looked around and said, like, whoa, what just happened? And guess what? They all came up with different takes on what just happened.
Right.
Until this very day, they still keep coming up on different takes of what just happened. And one of the greatest barometers, the political football that represents all that, is this Holocaust Memorial Day.
Right.
Which in Israel is a national holiday. I mean, it's a day off and all that, memorial and everything. In America, they always observe it like on Sunday, the closest Sunday, because in America, we have a tendency not to want to disrupt our schedules.
No, I don't do that.
Everything seems to devolve to the nearest Sunday.
Right.
Even there's some people doing that in Passover. I said to a lady, "Where are you going for the Seders?" I said, "Well, we can't do it this year because it was on Monday night.
Well,
it's not working out, but my family's coming and we're going to do it on Saturday night."
I understand that. It is a little inconvenient.
Right smack in the middle of the week.
I don't blame her on that.
We're doing it this week on Saturday night because that's when my family can come over. Okay, so that's the way we do it in America. So in America, they had a lot of observances on Sunday. I think in Israel, they might be observing it today. So the question came up. This is like a little historical note.
Right.
The Holocaust is over. The State of Israel is founded. So in the State of Israel, it became a great debate. Should we have a day to memorialize what just happened? And you have to remember that survivors or people who had lost family in the Holocaust were making up the majority of the State of Israel.
At that point, definitely.
At that point,
yeah.
I mean,
Right.
So it was heavy on the minds and the consciousness of everyone, right? Everyone, and people were walking around with numbers on their arms, and it was extremely present in everyone's mind. So they said we need to make Holocaust Memorial Day. Well, okay, what day should we choose?
I guess that's where it gets tough. Well, it depends. What are you honoring, or what are you observing? Are you observing the 6 million dead? Are you observing resistance? Or are you observing, the Jews coming into Israel? I mean, what are you observing?
So how did they pick now? I mean, it's a week or two after Passover. It's in the month of Nisan. It's in the spring. I mean, you could pick any day, I guess, right? So maybe they should have picked Kristallnacht.
Right.
That would have been a good one.
Right.
They could have picked the day that Germany surrendered. They could have picked the day that Germany started the war. They might have picked the day of the opening of Auschwitz, maybe the day of the closing of Auschwitz.
Right.
I mean, look, why now?
Well, obviously, there's a couple reasons. I mean, it could be the Warsaw Ghetto. It could be the resistance. I mean, that would be my first guess.
They go now because now was the Warsaw Ghetto uprising.
Right.
Right now, in the month of Nisan, in the Hebrew month of Nisan, spring and April, was the Warsaw Ghetto uprising. So why, of all things, did they pick? If I was going to pick, if I gave you the Holocaust, pick a date of a outstanding date of all the days in the Holocaust. So what would you pick?
I can understand the people who would pick Kristallnacht. I can understand the people who would pick, as you say, the liberation of Auschwitz or the end of the war. But I also understand the people that would pick the Warsaw Ghetto uprising.
The truth is, to tell you the truth, I don't think I even would have thought of that one. If I were to come up with names, as I said, throw out names. The reason I would have done Kristallnacht is because it was the first overt violence against Jews. There was a lot of covert, but it was the first overt violence.
Right.
And it really told the whole world, what's going on.
What's going to happen.
Everyone, right. I think everyone got it pretty. If you hadn't gotten it by now, at that point, you really had to get it.
Right.
And then, some other dates. Certainly the beginning of the war. I think, maybe when they bombed Poland or something like that. I can see. But the Warsaw Ghetto uprising wouldn't have occurred to me because I would have just thought that that's just another episode.
Right.
So how did they pick the Warsaw Ghetto Uprising as the date that epitomizes, that grabs the essence of the Holocaust?
I guess I understand. Well, it could be because, is the Holocaust a situation where the Jews were just rounded up and killed and murdered, which it was, or was it a situation where finally the Jews said for the first time in 2,000 years, no, we're not going to do this anymore. We're going to resist. We're going to fight.
So obviously the people that picked that date,
that's what they're thinking.
They're thinking like resistance, the highlight of the Holocaust, which was nothing but one low light, but the highlight of the Holocaust was the resistance. And therefore, they proposed that the Holocaust Memorial Day should be on the date of the Warsaw Ghetto Uprising. Now, there are a lot of other people that didn't have the same take on the Holocaust. There were a lot of people that said, who cares if they did an uprising or they didn't do an uprising? The fact that they were able to do an uprising, they did an uprising. Does that mean that the people that went to Auschwitz were they losers? Were they less Holocaust martyrs? Did they do less? Was there something wrong with them? Should they have stood up but they didn't? Are you implying that there was something wrong with all the other people?
Good question.
What's exactly your point? Now you also have to remember, when's all this discussion going on?
Well, during the formation of Israel, and I guess the way you look at it, it could be, okay, Jews for thousands of years did march to the orders of everyone else. Was it from the Spanish Inquisition with the Nazis, and all of a sudden for the first time ever under a Jewish flag, so to speak, the Jews fight. Isn't that kind of what the whole purpose of the state of Israel is to begin with?
Okay, and that was where the debate was really as with many of these debates, Sandy Hook or anything.
That's what really goes.
There's really like a debate that's going on, but the debate is just a front for another debate that's going on. And the other debate that's going on is, why do we have a state of Israel?
Good point.
That was another. So some people said that the Holocaust justifies and gives a reason to the state of Israel, because look what the world did to the Jews. And therefore, the Jews have to have their own land so they can pick up arms and defend themselves, because the whole world ganged up on us and killed us. But if we had a land to go to, we could have gone there, A. And B, if they would have come after us there, at least we could have picked up guns and fought. And even if we would have lost, but we would have fought them off. And that is why we have to have a state of Israel. And the Warsaw Ghetto Uprising epitomizes the very raison d'etre of a state of Israel. Self-determination, self-defense. I'm proud because I stand up and I fight, and that's why we have a state of Israel.
Now, some people probably would take that even further, and this is one of the questions I was going to ask you. Is that the reason there was a Holocaust? It's time for the Jews, these reluctant Jews spread out in the diaspora all over the world, it's time for them to go back and have their own state where they have self-determination. So the only way this is really going to happen is something like the Holocaust to bring the Jews back.
And some people said that. Some people said that. And then they go into it. There's a lot of like, well, they hate us because, we're different. We need our own state. Of course, time has certainly proven, and I'm not sure anyone really believed that was why they were hating us.
No.
That's why Hitler hated us. It's a little fuzzy. But they weren't really trying to say this will solve anti-Semitism, but at least we'll be able to fight.
Right.
Now, there were other people who took a whole different take on it. And they said, wait a second. Who cares if you can fight or if you don't fight? They wanted to ask a deeper question. Why did Hitler hate the Jews? As a matter of fact, why does everybody hate the Jews? You can call it Hitler, but everybody. Why does everybody hate the Jews? Why do the Jews run into all these problems? And where does the state in Israel fit in to that grand scheme of things? So these people said, you are missing the point. And it's almost as though, me personally, I keep referring to this Sandy Hook thing because that's what's going on right now.
Right.
To me, I don't really care too much. I'm not a gun guy. I don't really care too much about gun control or not gun control. And if they want to control, like attack weapons and all that, I don't really care because it's not going to hurt me. However, or it might hurt me, or I don't even know. But I don't like the debate because I believe that the debate is a cover-up and it's missing the point.
Without a doubt.
And worse yet, when they're done and they have legislated against guns, then they'll say, well, we took care of that problem.
And now we fixed that.
Now let's move on to something else.
Right.
In which case, and it won't be taken care of, and they didn't even put it under the rug because it's not at all under the rug, and they'll think so. That's why I'm against the gun debate because I think it's missing the point.
wrong debate.
Right, and that's where the debate about the Holocaust, this idea. That's why a lot of people said we are not going to observe that date because not that we reject. The people said, oh, and you don't care about all these people that died in the Holocaust. Well, of course, everyone cares about people that died in the Holocaust, right? Everyone has pain, and a lot of people that lost loved ones in the Holocaust didn't want to observe Holocaust Memorial Day. Why? Because they felt that if you framed the debate in that way, then you missed the whole point, because by framing the Holocaust that way, you now framed the state of Israel that way, and now the state of Israel is all about arming the Jews.
Right.
That's what it really is. It's about creating a refuge and arming the Jews. It doesn't deal with understanding anti-Semitism, because you don't understand it any better now that you have the state of Israel.
Right.
And to a certain extent, it protects the Jews, but not totally, because if all the nations of the world would gang up on them, they could wipe them out too. I mean, Mr. Ahmadinejad is, giving it a try. As a matter of fact, some people would say all you did was bring them all together so they were an easier
make it a little easier, which is true. And hasn't really gotten rid of the anti-Semitism.
No,
just as bad.
A lot of people would say that it has taken over the anti-Semitism. Right. Go onto college campuses today, and Jews or supporters of Israel, anti-Semitism, so passe. No one does anti-Semitism. Right. They do anti-Israelism.
Right, because we would have had that, right.
Right, but it's just anti-Semitism. So therefore, you framed it wrong. So what do they want to do? What was the alternative? Where do they want to go with it?
Well, it could be either the end of the war, or like we talked about earlier, a different date.
A different date.
It could be a date in January for the end with Auschwitz. So you could be different things.
So there's some people that proposed that the date already exists, it's already on the calendar, and it was dedicated to the Holocaust. And they said that the date should be the 9th day of the Jewish month of Av, which is a day that's been set aside to memorialize tragedy for the Jewish people. Because they said, we need to look at this in the context of the big picture, the scope of Jewish progress and travel through this world and the mission of the Jewish people. And it all goes back to Israel, and it starts from there. And if you really want to understand the Holocaust, you know what the first day of the Holocaust was? The day the Jews got kicked out of Israel.
Okay. All right.
That's when the Holocaust started. Because they were living in Israel, the Romans came, destroyed the temple, exiled the Jews. Well, it was just step after step after step that they ultimately ended up. The Holy Roman Empire became the Western Europe, became, the church.
Eventually became the Nazis.
And became the Nazis. Right? And the Nazis were just the latest round in that whole thing. Now, I know a lot of people, and this is why I didn't used to talk about this so much once upon a time, but I'll talk about more now, because there were a lot of people who were survivors of the Holocaust. Survivors of the Holocaust saw their loved ones die in the Holocaust. And they didn't want the Holocaust put in the context of the big scheme of Jewish history, because it trivialized or detracted from the personal pain that they were feeling. They didn't want to make this like a national tragedy. They wanted it to be a personal tragedy. You're talking about my mother here.
Right.
You're talking about my child. Like, this isn't, don't give me the Tisha B'Av, the 9th day of Av. I need something that is peculiar to my family.
Right.
Now, however, time has gone on, and most of the survivors are gone or are very elderly. You know, if someone was a teenager when the war broke out, they're in their 90s now.
Right, right.
You know, anyone that, so that's, they're mostly they're gone. We're losing them. So or they're old and frail. And now the point is, let's look ahead. So I made an interesting observation that I opened with before. So they made Holocaust Memorial Day.
Yep.
How's it doing?
Well, again, it's kind of fading away. With the Holocaust survivors, it's fading away the same way.
Right.
Yep.
It was only as good as the survivors themselves because they didn't pick on the theme that was long-lasting. They took the theme that was right in front of them.
Kind of a personal situation. Right.
At the moment, it's resistance, it's the state of Israel, and all that. Now, 60 years later, you got the state of Israel, and you got kids who've grown up in there, and it's a new reality, and no one's observing it.
Right.
No one's observing it. The only people that are still talking about the Holocaust on a regular basis are the religious people who are doing the 9th day of Av.
Good, because that's just part of the,
Because it fits within the context of a lifestyle that they have. That it's got a place within their annual cycle, that they put aside a day to do that. And besides, Orthodox are the type of people that when they put aside something to do it, they actually do it.
Right, and that's true.
And everyone else designates a day to do it, and then they don't do it because they're busy that day.
Well, you got to also remember the 9th day of Av comes right in summer vacation type time anyway, so that's kind of inconvenient. So
Truth is, you would say that it would be convenient because you don't have to take off work. A lot of people on vacation
I think
anyway.
you could be traveling.
Yeah, the problem is it's a fast day, and it's such a long day, such a late sunset.
That's not going to work.
Yeah, it's just really a pain. So the people that gave it a context, that said, okay, let's step away from right the here and now, and the point that you want to make right here and now, and step back. Let's look at the big picture, and let's talk about what will this mean to our grandchildren and their grandchildren. And they put it in that context. You know what? Those people's grandchildren and their grandchildren will still remember the Holocaust.
Right, that's true.
And everyone else's kids who just did it because they Holocaust, Warsaw Ghetto Uprising, and we need a state of Israel.
Right.
It's so tired now.
Right.
Talk to young children about we need a state of Israel. Well, they don't get it. What do you mean we need a state of Israel? They don't understand that. Now, talk to them about the grand scope of things. If they turn on to that message, then they'll have the Holocaust as part of that, and the Holocaust will be memorialized. Of course, if they don't turn on to that, they're not going to have the Holocaust, they're not going to have Judaism, they're not going to have anything.
Not going to have anything anyway, right.
So
interesting.
So that's why you find in many circles the Holocaust Memorial Day is just getting dropped. From half the people, they're dropping it because they just don't have time to work it into their schedule, and it's not a relevant message.
Right.
And the other half of the people, or the other group of people, they never bought into it in the first place because it's completely misplaced.
Right.
It's not our idea, and we don't buy it. And there you are. There you have it. Who is remembering it? Some people are still doing it. There are still survivors, and there's survivors' children, and people are doing it. And you've got all these different cities that have their Holocaust memorials and stuff like that. But the bottom line is, if you ask me, turn the clock ahead 50 years.
Right. Yeah.
To
put this in the long term and keep the remembrance and the memorial up, it's got to be more than just the Warsaw Ghetto Uprising or something.
In 50 years from now, if you want to hear about the Holocaust, what day of the year are you going to hear about it? I say Tisha B'Av. You'll go on Tisha B'Av and you'll hear Jews talking about the Holocaust. Go to the synagogue on Tisha B'Av. Jews will be talking about the Holocaust and remembering the tragedies. Holocaust Memorial Day? I don't know.
No, I agree. I agree with you. That makes sense. Now, here's the thing, though. Since I think you made a very good point there. Since we're talking about the Holocaust, I don't think you can have any conversation about the Holocaust. And I know I'm going to change it a little bit, but we have a little bit of time left. The question, I'm sure everybody as a rabbi is going to be talking about the Holocaust. So the question is always the same question. Okay, explain to me the Holocaust. I've read the Torah, I pray, we're Jews, we're God's chosen people. You can't leave a Holocaust conversation without the main one.
Right.
Why?
Right.
Why the Jews? Why then? Why now? And how could God possibly be there watching us when 6 million Jews, his chosen people, were killed and murdered?
Right.
And I'm sure you have the answer to this. Because
Yes. Right. I have the answer, and I will share it to you with you within the next 30 seconds.
Right.
So, first of all, people make a big deal out of this being a Holocaust question, but it's not a Holocaust question. I mean, go over to whatever they call it, Scottish Rite, which is now
that's a good point.
Emory Child Care or something like that, and go in the room, and you see any child suffering,
Right.
and it's the same question, right? That hospital should be empty, right? There should be no suffering in there,
Right.
and you can
Good
go in
point.
there, and you go in there. If you walk out and you're not crying, there's something wrong with you, right? And you say, God, like, how could you let this hospital exist? How could you fill it up? What are you filling up all those beds with all these tragedies for? So, anytime. You don't have to have, it doesn't take 6 million, it doesn't take 1 million children to die, which 1 million children died in the Holocaust.
Right.
It doesn't take 1 million children to die to, even one. So that's just we don't have to, we can ask that question at any time of the day.
You can, but when it's 6 million Jews, there's some point is being made here. Either no one's watching us or someone's watching us and is making a pretty big point here.
So I personally have always felt, and it's just a feeling, it's a gut feeling, that the people that they do that to, there's something special about them.
I've had the same feeling. But what is that? That's a kind of a weird thing to say, but I've had the same feeling. But why?
It is really, right.
I mean,
So
we're special because you killed 6 million of us.
It's a certain type of perverse pride.
Right.
That I'm the one. I mean, heaven forbid I would be the one that would actually do that to someone else.
Right.
That would be the worst. I don't know how a German wakes up in the morning and knows that he comes from the people that killed 6 million people, not to mention how many millions of other people. So I don't even know how any one of them can look their face in a mirror.
Right.
But it is a certain perverse pride. What it tells me is that the world recognizes that there is something special and unique about these people. That the world detests them because they represent something else that's different, and we don't like it. And it's not just some anonymous tribe somewhere in the middle of Africa or something like that.
Right.
We're talking about prominent people that certainly, as much as they tried to dehumanize them, they certainly knew that these people were smart, that they were industrious, that they had accomplished a lot. No one could deny that.
That they needed to be feared.
Right. It wasn't listen, when they came to the United States and they started killing off Indians, the general rule was these people are backward and they're preventing, you got to get rid of them because they're preventing us from taking over the country and making something good out of it.
Right.
Okay. So they had to do that to the Jews. But they had a pretty tough time doing that to the Jews because they had to get rid of all the Jewish literature and all the Jewish accomplishments. They had to throw all the Jews out of the universities and all that type of stuff. So the bottom line is everyone recognizes that there is something very unique and something very special about the Jews. The fact that the Jews elicit this antipathy from the world shows you even more that there's something very special and very unique about the Jews. And ultimately, to me, says when the world finally realizes that instead of trying to wipe us out, let's see what the Jews can do for providing some leadership and direction, then maybe the world will be onto something. But in the meantime, they of course try to wipe it out. And I picture it like my grandchildren. My grandchildren, we got this, my wife bought this great little set of, erector set for the grandchildren.
Right.
And they got these tiles. This one's a new one. They got these little tiles and they have little magnets on the corners. So they all magnet together. So the kids are sitting there and they're building a tower. And they build this tower, and they build this tower, and they build this tower. And along comes the little brother, who really is not too good at building towers. And where does he come in and do? He just, bam!
See that.
He smashes it down. And they're, and they beat him up and all that. And the parents got to go pull him apart and everything. Why the kid knock it down?
He couldn't do it?
He's right. That's his only contribution that he can make because he's boxed out. They're building this great edifice, and he is just so outraged because he can't be part of it. So the only thing he can do is knock it down. It's too precious. It's too great. The only thing that he can do is knock it down.
Wow. Actually, that actually makes sense. That actually, again, I don't know if there's an exact answer, but that makes sense.
Yeah.
It makes sense to me. There's got to be a reason.
So, listen, it's very complex, but the animosities and the hatred of the world against the Jews, certainly in the Eastern European countries, in Poland, in Ukraine, and all that, when the local populace,
they joined in pretty well.
when they jumped in and they started doing all this stuff to the Jews and rounding up the Jews and chasing them, hounding them, and killing them, and all that, those people could not possibly have been thinking that these folks that we're after are inferior.
Right. No, without a doubt.
Because many of them worked for those Jews.
They worked for them.
They worked in Jewish factories, and they worked in their homes, and they saw their wealth. And as a matter of fact, many of them were just happy to kill them off so they could take over all that wealth.
Right.
So they couldn't have been feeling these people are somehow inferior.
Right.
There's something else going on. And to me, they were just knocking down the tower because they couldn't build it.
They build it themselves.
And then what are you left with? The bottom line is everyone's just left with a bunch of broken tiles on the floor.
Until the Jews rebuild it again.
Until they rebuild it again. And I guess that's what they went after Israel to do.
Right.
And, so now they went after Israel to doing it, and now they got Startup Nation and all that type of stuff.
Right. And a lot of people standing around and ready to knock it down again.
Yeah, just dying too.
That's how very interesting, and I'm glad we had this discussion on today's date, or if it was on the 9th of Av, either one.
That's right.
It's good to have the conversation.
That's right.
All right, great. Well, we will come back next week and have another great episode of Jeff and the Rabbi.